In the hush between autumn's last sigh and winter's first breath, there lies a moment that does not belong to time. A hush so deep, so still, it feels as though the world has stopped remembering itself. Trees stand naked and patient, their branches like the bones of forgotten prayers. The wind moves softly, as if careful not to disturb what is sleeping beneath the earth. Frost creeps in shadows, delicate as lace, and the rivers begin to quiet, losing their voices to ice. In that silence, her name stirs, not spoken but felt, like a chill across the skin of the soul. Morana. She is not born of spring's laughter nor of summer's passion. She does not bloom, nor does she burn. She arrives as a breath held too long, as the last light before night devours the sky. To some she is a goddess, to others a ghost, to all she is the end. But hers is no crude scythe, no violent taking. Morana comes with elegance, with the serenity of inevitability. Her touch does not bruise, it stills. Her kiss does not scorch, it silences. They say she was once flesh, a woman of aching beauty, with skin like snowfall, and eyes that knew too much. They say she loved too deeply, or perhaps not enough, that she walked willingly into the cold one winter and never came back. The truth, like her presence, is elusive. She is more myth than memory, and yet more real than the warmth that fades each year when she returns. Her story is sewn into the rhythm of the seasons, stitched into the turning of the wheel. In the northern lands, where the sun forgets to rise for days at a time, the people do not speak of her loudly. They leave offerings in the snow, dark berries, red cloth, silver trinkets, tokens to appease her, to soften her journey. Children are taught to respect the ice, to listen to the silence, to not wander into the woods when the sky is the color of steel. For it is in these places, in these moments of quiet dread, that Morana walks. She is not cruel, she is simply what must be. She comes when it is time for the world to rest, when the soil must sleep, when the trees must shed, when the heart must remember that nothing is eternal. But there is beauty in her path, a haunting, aching beauty, the kind found in the stillness of snowfall, in the clarity of breath on a frozen morning, in the way light refracts through a curtain of icicles. Her realm is not empty, it is full of endings that whisper like lovers. Some dream of her. They see her in the distance, standing among the withered reeds, her form veiled in frost and smoke. She does not speak, but her silence is louder than thunder. Some wake weeping, others smiling. For to see Morana is to be reminded of what we lose and what we carry. She does not take without giving. In every death, she plants the seed of longing, in every silence, a memory. It is said that she lingers longest in the hearts of those who grieve, that she finds her way into their breath, their bones, their gaze. And yet she is not always unwelcome. There are those who find comfort in her closeness, the weary, the forgotten, the ones who have known too much light and are ready for shadow. They welcome her, not as a destroyer, but as a balm, an end that feels like a beginning. The old women in the village say she was once the sister of the sun, that they loved the same man, and when he chose the sun's warmth, Morana cursed the world to grow cold each year in remembrance. Others claim she is the first widow, and winter is the grief she never learned to let go of. But whatever her origin, it is agreed, she returns. Always. Her arrival is not marked by trumpet or drum, but by the slow turning inward of all things. Animals burrow, leaves curl and fall, lovers draw closer to their fires, the pulse of the world quiets, and then she is there, not outside, but within, in the shiver between thoughts, in the sudden stillness of a snow-covered path, in the hush that falls just before dusk. She wraps herself around the soul, not to suffocate, but to still its restless thrashing. To know Morana is to understand the necessity of letting go. To touch her, even in dream, is to remember that love is not always warmth. It is sometimes frost, sharp and clear and painful, and yet no less beautiful, no less true. There are places where winter never ends, valleys where the sun rarely dares to shine, where silence reigns so deeply it feels like velvet. In those places, it is said, Morana sleeps, not in a grave, but in a cradle of ice, her breath steady and long, her dreams shaping the snowfall. She does not sleep alone. Around her are the ghosts of seasons past, the memories of things that once were, a petal, a flame, a whispered name. And when she stirs, the earth listens. It knows her steps even before the frost appears. The roots tighten, the wind changes direction. The moon grows fuller, whiter, as though lighting her path. She moves slowly, but never aimlessly. Her presence is not a threat. It is a truth, a gentle, aching reminder that all things fade, and in that fading are made more precious. Those who follow her path do not do so lightly. Some go mad, some never return. Others come back changed, quieter, softer, touched by something they cannot name. Their eyes linger longer on the dying leaves. Their hands tremble before picking a flower. Their hearts beat a little slower when snow begins to fall. They do not fear her, not anymore. Morana is not death. She is the moment before, the breath before the plunge, the sigh before the sleep. She is the weight of snow on the roof, the lull between words, the softness of skin before the cold sets in. She is the curve of the night around the last spark of fire. And though she takes, she does not leave you empty. She leaves you remembering. When the wheel of the year turns once more, and spring begins to stretch its limbs, she does not fight. She steps aside. She disappears like mist, like dream, like memory. She does not rage against the light. She simply fades, but never entirely. For there is always the promise of her return, always the understanding that she will walk the earth again with quiet steps and a gaze that sees too much. And so the story begins not with her birth, but with her presence. a presence felt in the turning leaves, in the long shadows of twilight, in the deep and quiet hush that descends when all is about to sleep. The world belongs to her, if only for a while, and in that while there is a kind of love, not loud, not warm, but deep, unflinching, eternal. Morana does not ask to be loved. She does not seduce. She is simply there, like the cold that finds its way through the thickest door, like the silence that settles after the last song. And in that presence there is a truth. All things must end, and in that ending we find what we truly are.
Under a sky the color of ash, Morana walks. She does not glide nor float. She steps with purpose, as though every movement is part of a forgotten ritual. The fields beneath her are brittle and bare, and yet she walks them as though they bloom beneath her feet. Her presence does not beg attention, it commands it. Not with force, but with stillness. The world holds its breath when she passes. She wears no crown, yet her bearing is sovereign. Her garments, spun of frost and night, cling to her like whispers from the other side. Her skin is pale as starlight in a snowstorm, not lifeless, but luminous, and her eyes, those vast, unblinking wells of winter, seem to see not only what is, but what was and will never be again. Morana is not cruel, but she is not soft. She carries beauty like a blade, and silence like a song. Sensual, yes, but in the way the cold wind brushes against bare skin, waking something primal. She is untouchable, and yet everything in her invites the ache of longing. She does not speak often, and when she does, her voice is slow and smooth, like a lullaby that leads one to sleep they may not wake from. When she looks at you, it is not with desire, but with recognition. She sees the death you will one day become, the silence already blooming in your chest. To be seen by her is to feel your mortality like a lover's hand pressed to your throat. But she is not alone in this story. He came from the south, where the sun still warmed the skin and rivers still ran fast and clear. A scholar, some say, a priest. Others say he was born with winter in his veins, though he spent his life fleeing from it. His name has been lost, or perhaps it was never known, for names are small things in the presence of gods. He came to seek her, though whether it was wisdom or defiance or desire that led him is unclear. Perhaps all three, perhaps none. He was not a warrior. He bore no sword, only words and thoughts. But his gaze did not flinch when he saw her. He knelt in the frost and looked up into her face with neither reverence nor fear. There was a hunger in him, not for her body, though she was beautiful beyond all things, but for the mystery she carried in her silence, for the quiet she stitched into the seams of the world. Morana looked at him and did not speak, but something stirred in her eyes, a flicker like moonlight on black water. She had been seen before, worshipped, feared, but not like this, not with this strange, quiet ache. He did not ask her for blessings or mercy. He only walked beside her, where the earth cracked beneath their steps and the trees stood brittle and bare. He should have turned back. Everyone said so. The villagers watched from a distance, lighting candles and whispering prayers. No one followed him into her realm. No one ever had. And yet he stayed, returning day after day to the edge of the fields, then deeper still, until he stood where breath crystallized on the tongue, and the air tasted of sleep. There was no courtship, not as mortals know it, no flowers, no flattery. But there were glances that lingered a breath too long. There were silences shared beneath silver skies. He began to understand the shape of her solitude, the weight of her eternity. He did not try to warm her. He knew better. Instead, he let the cold reach him. He let it peel away the layers of what he thought he was, until all that remained was the truth he had never spoken. He longed for her, not for her body, though it stirred him, not for her power, though it terrified him, but for the quiet she wore like a second skin, for the way she moved through endings as though they were beginnings, for the way she looked at the world not with pity, but with understanding. In her gaze he saw the beauty of letting go.
But Morana did not reach for him. She watched, as the snow watched the ground it would one day cover. She did not ask him to stay, but she never turned him away. There was something delicate forming between them, like frost forming on glass, a thin, shimmering line of intimacy that threatened to break with every breath. She knew what he wanted, even if he did not, and she knew what it would cost. For to touch her is to be marked. To love her is to unravel. She began to see his face in her dreams. Strange, since gods do not dream in the way mortals do. But there he was, again and again, standing in the hollow of a tree or beside a frozen stream, always silent, always waiting. She told herself it was curiosity, nothing more, that his persistence amused her, that she felt no pull, but she lied. There was something in him that mirrored the sadness she carried, a familiar fracture. Not death, but the knowing of death. He had lost something, someone. She saw it in the way he held his hands when he thought no one watched, in the way he stared too long at the sky. She never asked him what it was, but she felt it, the hollowness in him that matched the echoing chamber of her own soul. It was not love, not yet. Love is a word too warm, too tender. What passed between them was quieter, deeper, stranger. A seduction not of body, but of spirit. She circled him like winter circling the sun. He reached for her like fire, trying to remember its first spark. They did not touch, but every shared silence was a caress. Every breath was a promise not yet spoken. And still he stayed. She watched the frost take hold of his skin, pale him, slow him. He was changing, becoming something not quite mortal, not yet divine. He had stepped too far into her realm, and she could not or would not lead him back. She wondered if he knew what he was giving up, or if he had already decided that there was nothing left for him in the world beyond her. Perhaps that is what bound them, not love, but loss, not desire, but surrender. For what is Morana, if not the quiet that follows pain, the sleep that follows the sob? What is she, if not the one who stands at the edge of all things and waits, not to push, but to receive? And what is he, if not the soul drawn to the edge, tired of fighting the wind, ready to fall into stillness? There in the barren fields, where no birds sang and no flowers dared to bloom, they became something more than goddess and mortal. They became the question and the ache, the frost and the flame that would not die, a tension that pulled tighter with every breath, each one bringing them closer to something that could not be named, only felt. They stood apart, and yet never closer.
The days grew shorter. The sky, once a dim pewter, deepened into a heavy slate that seemed to press down on the world. Snow began to fall, not in flurries, but in slow, deliberate curtains that veiled the landscape like mourning veils drawn across the eyes of the earth. Each morning the mortal awoke colder, not merely in body, but in memory. His breath came in white strands of smoke that hung in the air long after he exhaled, as though his presence were slowly slipping into another state of being. Still, he returned to her. He found her one twilight standing barefoot on a frozen lake, the ice beneath her shimmering with a silver-blue light that seemed to come from within her skin. She stood unmoving, her long hair spilling down her back like ink in snow. When she turned to face him, her gaze did not pierce, it enveloped. He felt the urge to step forward and kneel, not from devotion, but from surrender. But he didn't, not yet. She said nothing. He said her name, Morana. Just that, as if saying it out loud might soften the way it lingered on his tongue when he tried to sleep, as if naming her might make her less unknowable. She looked at him for a long time, and something in her expression shifted. Not kindness, not affection, but recognition. She had seen this look before in those who came to her at the final breath, not ready to die, yet unable to go on living. The tension, the ache, the tremble between retreat and fall. That night the cold inside him grew, not cruelly, but quietly. A slow crystallization of the heart, a freezing over of things he once thought essential. He tried to remember the name of the river in his homeland, the taste of ripe fruit, the smell of sunlight on cloth. They slipped through him like mist. All that remained was her. She came to him in the woods the next day, when the sky wept fine flakes of snow that clung to every surface like whispers of things unsaid. He was shivering when she approached, though not from cold. She placed a hand on his cheek, and it burned, not with heat, but with clarity. Her fingers were cold, yes, but beneath that cold was a hum, a pulse, a yearning. He leaned into it before he could stop himself. "I'm afraid," he whispered as her thumb brushed the corner of his mouth. "Of me?" she asked. He shook his head. "Of what I want." She did not pull away. "Then we are the same." Her words struck something deep in him. For the first time, he saw not a goddess, not a myth, but a woman shaped by centuries of solitude. She longed not for the warmth of bodies, but for the warmth of remembrance. To be known, not worshipped. To be touched, not feared. To be more than a season in someone's life. She wanted to be the ache they carried forever. Their breaths mingled in the space between them. Fog and silence and unspoken need. He leaned in closer, but stopped just before his lips met hers. The air around them seemed to pulse, thick with the weight of what could be. Her hand lingered at his jaw, trembling faintly, barely perceptible, but enough. She turned away. The snow fell harder that night. Trees groaned under the weight of ice. The ground hardened like iron. The village below shuttered its doors, whispering old prayers, lighting candles against a darkness they could not name. For in the high places, in the stillness where no birds flew and no fire could warm, something was shifting. Winter was no longer a season, it was a feeling, a hunger. He came to her again, this time in her hollow sanctuary where frost clung to every surface like delicate veins. She sat on a stone throne, still and regal, her gaze distant. He knelt, not out of reverence, but from exhaustion. "I can't go back," he said. She nodded slowly. "I know. I dream of you. But when I wake, I wonder if I'm already dreaming. If you're real. Or if I've frozen into something else." Marana's voice, when it came, was low and aching. "You are becoming mine." The room seemed to dim, not with darkness, but with silence, the kind that presses against the inside of the chest. He rose slowly, approaching her. This time she did not move. His fingers reached for her face, and for a breathless moment she let him. His hand cupped her cheek, and her eyes fluttered closed. It felt like touching wind carved into form, like holding beauty that wasn't meant to be held. "Why do you let me stay?" he asked. "Because I want to know what it feels like to be chosen, not feared." The confession struck like thunder beneath ice. In her timeless existence, she had always been awaited, never invited. Her presence was braced for, not longed for. And now here he was, not with prayers, not with sacrifices, but with trembling hands and longing eyes. He kissed her. It was soft, unsure, like a question offered in the dark. And Marana, for the first time in eons,
answered. The kiss did not warm her, but it stirred something colder still, a crack through the middle of the ice within her. Not pain, not joy, but sensation. His lips were warm, trembling, mortal. She tasted him, fear, longing, surrender. She did not deepen it, she only let it be. A single moment of stillness breaking into need. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet, not from tears, but from the ache of having touched something eternal and being unable to hold it. "Will I die?" he asked. She did not answer. Outside, the winds howled, trees bent, the river froze solid. The world itself began to mirror what brewed between them. Desire with no resolution, longing that led only deeper into cold, yet neither could walk away. He began to forget more. Words escaped him, the names of colors, the lines of poems, the shape of fire. But he remembered her. And she too found herself unraveling. She walked among the frost-bitten woods and thought of his voice. She touched her lips and remembered his kiss. She pressed her hand to her chest and felt for the first time something stir that was not ancient or divine, but utterly human. She began to hope. It was a dangerous thing for a goddess of endings. The snow deepened. The world slowed. The space between them narrowed. One breath at a time, they fell, not into love, but into something older and darker and sweeter. Desire. The world held its breath. Snow no longer fell. It hovered, flakes suspended in the air like stars in pause, too awed to descend. The trees, cloaked in white, stood as witnesses, their branches heavy with silence. Even the wind had gone still, curling in upon itself, afraid to intrude. In the heart of this stillness they met. Not in words, not in ceremony, but in a quiet place where breath became meaning and time unraveled its hold. He stood before her, pale and trembling, his eyes glazed with the chill that had begun to seep into his soul. Yet there was no fear, only acceptance. He reached for her as though reaching across a lifetime, fingers brushing the frost-lined edge of her collarbone. She did not move, but her lips parted, just slightly, as if the gesture stirred something deep, something ancient and buried. And then, with a grace both devastating and divine, she leaned into him. Their bodies did not collide, but folded into one another, slow, like melting ice finding its way to water. Her forehead met his. Her hands, cool as marble, pressed to his chest, and he, burning quietly from within, wrapped his arms around her as if afraid she might dissolve in his grasp. There was no rush, no urgency, only surrender. He gasped, not from pain, but from the feeling of her entering him. Not with force, not even with intention, but like breath slipping between lips. Her essence, colder than anything he had ever known, slipped beneath his skin. It did not hurt. It shimmered. It softened everything he was. It erased the last line between desire and dissolution. Their lips met again. This time it was not a question. It was a descent. The kiss was not fire.
It was the hush of snowfall on a silent plain, the slow collapse of walls long held firm. It was the soul opening, bleeding something soft and sacred into the void. His mouth moved against hers like a prayer, slow and reverent. Her lips tasted not of ice, but of memory. Every moment of quiet longing he had ever buried beneath noise and duty and time. And she, the goddess of endings, moaned. Softly, barely. But it broke the world open. Light erupted from beneath their feet, pale and silver, rising around them in a spiral of frost-lit haze. Their bodies, still and entwined, began to glow, not with heat, but with unspoken truths. He felt her memories, centuries of silence, the ache of being known only through fear, the weight of carrying death like a crown. She felt his longing, the ache of mortality, the grief of letting go, the quiet desperation to matter to something eternal.
Their union was not consummated in flesh, but in essence. Her cold flooded his veins, and his warmth seeped into the cracks of her eternal form. They did not make love, they became it. A trembling, impossible fusion of ache and release. Time ceased. For a breathless moment there was no goddess, no man, only feeling. Tears slipped down his face, not from sorrow, not from joy, but from the unbearable beauty of it, of being seen, of being taken in, of touching death and discovering that it longed to be touched. Morana clutched him tighter, her fingers curling into his back. She buried her face in the crook of his neck, and for the first time in all her endless years, she trembled, not with power, but with fragility, with need. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. He held her closer, the frost on his skin blooming into pale patterns like lace. "You already have me." In that moment, they were everything. The final breath before sleep, the last note of a song, the last leaf clinging to the branch before the wind takes it. Pleasure laced with sorrow, ecstasy shadowed by the certainty of ending. Their union was not a promise, but a moment, perfect in its impossibility, and that was what made it sacred. The frost deepened. Around them the world went quiet, so quiet that the snow no longer crunched beneath their feet, but sighed. Trees no longer stood still, they bowed. The sky, heavy with memory, wept silver. They stayed like that for what felt like forever, until the world began to remember time again. Until the snow began to fall once more. She pulled back first, slowly, eyes searching his face as though trying to memorize it before the dream ended. And it was a dream, of that they both knew. This could not last. She was winter, and he was not. But he smiled. Not with sadness, with peace. He had found the thing he didn't know he was looking for. Not love, not answers, but meaning. And she, Morana, the bringer of ends, had tasted for the first time what it meant to begin. She touched his face once more.
fingertips leaving trails of frost that did not burn. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something softer. Grief, perhaps, or grace. He was fading. His skin, once flushed and full, had paled into porcelain, veins traced with ice, breath shallow and slow. But he did not fight it. He leaned into her touch and smiled. "You're not death," he whispered. "No." Her voice trembled. "You're what makes it beautiful." And with that, he closed his eyes. The snow fell. The wind returned, and the world once again began to turn.
She was gone. Not with thunder, not with the solemn grace of a closing door, but like the last breath of winter, unnoticed until it was missed. One moment Marana stood before him, a figure of cold divinity wrapped in silence, and the next she had become part of the air, part of the memory, part of the ache that lingers when something sacred departs. The mortal awoke beneath a tree crowned in hoarfrost, its limbs outstretched like fingers reluctant to let him go. The snow was soft beneath him, yet it did not bite. Instead, it cradled him. He blinked into the pale light of morning, and for a moment could not move. His body had changed. He was no longer the same man who had dared to walk into the frozen woods, no longer the one who feared death like a thief in the night. He touched his chest and felt her there, not as a wound, but as a pulse, a chill, quiet and steady, like a breath waiting in stillness. He stood, slowly. Every step was heavy with remembrance. Around him, winter was loosening its grip. The trees still bore frost, but the air held a faint hum, a prelude to thaw. Beneath the snow, the earth murmured, tiny silent promises beginning to stir. The silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt full, expectant. He returned to the village, but the village did not recognize him. His face was familiar, but his presence had shifted, as though a ghost walked in tandem with him, whispering truths only he could hear. The other villagers avoided his gaze, though some crossed themselves when he passed. They said he had walked into death and returned untouched. They said Marana had claimed his soul and let him live. They said many things, but he did not speak. How could he? How could mere words explain what it meant to be undone so beautifully, to be unraveled by a goddess who kissed like forgetting and held you like silence? How could he describe the way her voice echoed still in his blood? How her eyes, those endless winters, had changed the seasons inside him? So he simply watched, the way spring hesitated that year, as if unsure whether it had permission to return. The way frost lingered longer than it should have on windows and roofs. The way children laughed less loudly in the morning, sensing something beneath the surface of the world that even they could not name. He walked often, into the woods, into silence. There, far from hearth and harvest, he built a shrine, not a towering monument, just a circle of dead branches and pale stones, each one kissed by frost that never melted. In the center, he laid a piece of black cloth, soft as breath, cold as memory. It never gathered dust. Flowers placed at its edge would not rot. They withered, yes, but held their shape, suspended in a strange, gentle sleep. There he would sit and wait and remember. His dreams were no longer filled with fear. Now they carried the echo of her voice, distant and low, threading through sleep like a song without words. He saw her often, never clearly, never completely. Just a silhouette in the mist, a sigh beneath the snow, a hand he reached for and never quite held again. Yet each time he woke, he smiled, not from joy, not from sorrow, from reverence. Because he had known her, the world shifted with him.
Spring returned, eventually, though not as it once had. It crept in slowly, tenderly, as if mourning what it replaced. Buds appeared on trees like hesitant thoughts. The river, once silent, began to hum. The earth softened, and green crept cautiously through the cracks. But the winter had left something behind. A thin, pale thread that wound through the world like silver lace, an ache, a hush, a memory. People felt it in the pause between breaths, in the way shadows stretched just a little longer at dusk. They began to leave offerings at the edges of forests, bits of cloth, shards of bone, crushed petals, not out of fear, out of awe, as if they too sensed that something divine had passed near. He, the man, lived quietly. He spoke when needed, but never of her. He worked the fields, though his hands no longer hungered for the harvest. He drank with neighbors, though wine no longer warmed him. He loved, in a way, though never as he had loved her, not with the terrifying clarity of surrender. That love had burned him to ash, and now he walked with the echo of it inside him. Some nights, when the wind curled low and cold, he would lie awake, eyes open to the dark, and he would feel her, not beside him, not touching, but present, a weightless pressure on the edge of his soul. He no longer feared the end. It would come, he knew, like a lover long expected, and when it did, he would not resist, because he had seen the truth, that death was not a closing door, but a quiet invitation, that Morana was not cruelty, but grace cloaked in ice, that even in the stillness of endings there is the whisper of beginning. The years passed, and still he returned to her shrine. In winter, he would kneel in the snow, bare-kneed, head bowed. He would speak to her then, not with words, but with presence, offering his silence as tribute, his longing as devotion. And sometimes the snow around him would bloom in patterns, spirals, stars, a single handprint near his own. Those were the days he smiled most. When he died, it was not sudden. He laid himself down beneath the tree where he had first awakened, alone but not lonely, cold but not afraid. And in his final breath he whispered her name, not to call her,
but to thank her. And somewhere far in the north a wind rose, soft, slow, grieving or welcoming. And spring did not come that year until the snow melted from his body, revealing skin untouched by time and lips curved into the gentlest smile. They buried him where he lay, but the frost never left the earth beneath him. Flowers grew around his grave, but none dared cross the circle of snow that lingered even in summer. Children were told to leave that place alone, but some, drawn by stories they only half believed, would venture close. They'd stand at the edge of the clearing and feel it, a chill that wasn't cruel, a peace that wasn't warm. And once a girl swore she saw a woman there, tall, pale, draped in black and silver, eyes like snowfall, standing beside the grave with her hand pressed to her heart. And though she said nothing, the trees bowed, and the wind stilled, and something ancient smiled. In the quiet aftermath, when the world has folded itself beneath the weight of snow and silence, a question lingers like the last breath of winter. Is love worth the frostbite? It is a question that threads through the stillness, winding like a cold river beneath the frozen earth, impossible to ignore and impossible to answer fully. For in loving Morana, the goddess of winter and death, one loves not just a being, but the very essence of endings. Those tender, biting moments where beauty and loss entwine. It is a love that is both exquisite and cruel, fragile and enduring, a paradox wrapped in ice and shadow. Do we long for what ends us? This truth cuts sharper than any blade, whispering beneath the wind's mournful song. To love Morana is to embrace the inevitability of decay, to taste the sweetness that comes with surrendering to the cold, to feel the fragile bloom of life in the shadow of death. Her touch is both a blessing and a curse, a seduction born from the promise that every ending births something new, even if that newness is shrouded in frost. It is the ache of knowing that what we desire most deeply may also be what unravels us, and yet we reach for it anyway. Like the first snowflake that falls without sound, her presence is subtle yet profound, a delicate weaving of silence and shadow that colors the world in shades of gray and silver. She moves through the land like a forgotten lover, her footsteps soft against withered fields and barren branches. Her eyes hold the light of countless winters, vast and inscrutable, inviting and unreachable. To glimpse her is to peer into the infinite stillness that cradles all things, to stand at the edge of time itself and feel both the chill and the warmth of existence. She is the embodiment of silence after the storm, the stillness that teaches us to listen, the frost that reminds us of what lies beneath the surface. In the deep quiet, where breath hangs visible in the air and the earth sleeps beneath a crystal shroud, Morana waits, not as a specter of fear, but as a guardian of the fragile moments between life and death, between what has been and what might be.
She is the silence after the song, the calm that follows the storm, the cold that teaches us to cherish the fire within. Her presence is a lesson in balance, between surrender and strength, between loss and remembrance. She is both the end and the promise of a beginning, a paradox of existence embodied in frost and shadow. Her return is certain as the turning of the seasons. Each year when the days grow short and the nights stretch long, the air sharpens and the world holds its breath. It is then that Morana stirs, weaving her frost-laced fingers through the trees, painting the landscape with delicate frostwork that glimmers like broken glass beneath the moon. Her touch is a reminder that all things must yield to the cycle, that even the brightest flame must one day flicker and fade. And yet in that fading lies profound beauty. For love touched by Morana is never truly lost. It is transformed. It becomes a memory etched in ice, a song sung in whispers, a flame that glows softly beneath the snow. It is a love that endures beyond the thaw, beyond the decay, a testament to the strength found in surrender. We carry her with us, in the chill that bites at our skin, in the hush that falls before a storm, in the quiet moments when we feel the weight of our own mortality. We carry her in the way we ache for connection, even knowing that all things must end. In that ache lies the truth of our humanity. To love is to risk loss, to reach toward what may never be held, to find warmth in the cold.
And so, beneath the heavy sky and the whispering pines, we remember Morana, not as a goddess to fear, but as a presence to honor, a delicate balance of life and death, pleasure and pain, warmth and frost. She is the ache of endings, the grace of letting go, the silent promise that something new will always follow. She teaches us that surrender is not defeat, but a sacred act of courage, that to embrace the cold is to honor the fire that burns within us. When the frost returns and the world quiets beneath its cold embrace, listen closely. You may hear her footsteps in the snow, soft and sure, coming back to claim her place in the endless dance of time. And with her, the aching beauty of winter, a reminder that in every ending there is a beginning, and in every silence, a song waiting to be heard. The snowflakes fall like whispers from a forgotten dream, each one a story, a memory, a promise carried on the wind. They speak of love that transcends time, of loss that deepens our understanding, of beauty found in the fragile and the fleeting. Is love worth the frostbite? Perhaps. For to love Morana is to live fully in the moments between, to find meaning in the fragile and the fleeting, to embrace the eternal dance of light and shadow. It is a love that teaches us to cherish the warmth while we can, to honor the cold when it comes, and to find beauty in both. To love Morana is to accept the duality of existence, to know that pleasure and pain are intertwined, that joy and sorrow are two sides of the same coin. It is to walk willingly into the unknown, guided by the soft glow of a flame that will one day be extinguished, but whose light will linger long after. So let the frost fall, let the world turn to ice and silence, for in that stillness Morana waits, and in waiting she holds the promise that even death itself is touched by love. Her embrace is not the end, but the quiet beginning of transformation. In her cold hands we find the courage to let go, the grace to move forward, the strength to love despite knowing what awaits. We are never truly alone, for Morana is always near, her breath in the winter wind, her touch in the frost that glistens on the grass, her voice in the hush that follows a storm. She is the delicate thread that binds us to the cycle of life and death, the eternal rhythm that guides our hearts through the dark and the light. And in that eternal rhythm, we find ourselves. We find love. We find hope. Morana's story is ours, the story of longing and loss, of passion and surrender, of endings that give birth to new beginnings. It is a story told in whispers and shadows, in the delicate frost that lingers on a window pane, in the soft silence of a world at rest. Remember her. Honor her. Love her. For she is the frostbite and the fire, the ending and the beginning, the silence and the song. And in loving her, we learn what it truly means to live.